Imagine a world without shipping. Supermarket shelves empty out, factories grind to a halt, and the global economy goes into shock. That might sound extreme, but we've already had a taste of it. First with COVID lockdowns, then when the Ever Given blocked the Suez Canal in 2021, holding up nearly 10% of global trade in a single, very embarrassing parking accident. These incidents were a reality check. They showed just how much we rely on global shipping, not just for luxuries, but for the basics of modern life. Around 80% of global trade by volume travels by sea. Maritime transport is the lifeblood of global commerce and connectivity, but all that convenience comes at a climate cost. In 2022, international shipping was responsible for nearly 3% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. If shipping were a country, it would be the 6th biggest emitter, sitting between Russia and Japan. So if we're serious about climate targets, we can't ignore the ocean. In this video, we're going to explore what it will take to bring shipping's emissions down to zero, and the technologies that could actually get us there. I'm Rosie Barnes, founder of Paddle Consulting, where we advise on clean energy technologies, helping startups with development and investors with assessing the landscape. Welcome to Engineering with Rosie. The scale of global shipping is on a completely different level from any other form of transport. The biggest container ships can carry more than 20,000 TEUs. TEU is 20-foot equivalent units, i.e. shipping containers. For context, when my partner and I moved from Denmark back to Australia, we couldn't even fill one. So a ship that size could carry the entire worldly belongings of a small city on one single trip. And it's surprisingly efficient. To move 1 ton of cargo 1 kilometre, air freight uses around 3.8 megajoules, a heavy truck uses 1.7 megajoules, freight rail is 0.22, and marine shipping, it's only a tiny bit higher than rail at 0.35 megajoules per tonne per kilometre. That efficiency isn't some modern marvel, it's been that way for thousands of years. From early rafts floating down rivers to ancient Egyptians navigating the Nile, humans have always found it easier to move goods by water than over land. Vikings expanded trade with longships. Empires were built on naval trade. Shipping has just always been at the heart of economic progress. Today, it's easier to send the components of a smartphone, the equivalent of a round trip to the moon, than to build the whole thing near where it'll be used. Cobalt from the Congo, lithium from Australia processed in China, silicon from Brazil, refined in Germany, made into chips in South Korea and assembled in Vietnam, and then shipped worldwide to end up in your pocket. All these kilometres mean that despite being relatively efficient per tonne and per kilometre, shipping produces huge emissions overall due to how large the industry is. In total, about 13 billion tonnes of cargo are shipped every year. Half of that is dry bulk, coal, iron ore, grains and other raw materials. Another 20 to 30% is liquid bulk, mainly oil and gas. The rest is vehicles, machinery and containerized goods like electronics and clothing. So how did we get to the point where all that shipping can possibly make sense? The answer to that is simple. Shipping is incredibly cheap. This has been the result of a long series of small and boring innovations in vessel and port operations, in maintenance, in logistics, and also, critically, in the type of fuel used. The most common fuel used in commercial shipping is bunker fuel, particularly heavy fuel oil, due to its high energy content and low cost. Bunker fuel is derived from the crude oil refining process, and it is the literal bottom of the barrel, the stuff nobody else wants. This means it's very widely available and very cheap, which makes it a convenient option for powering the vast majority of the world's shipping fleet. However, its use has significant environmental implications. Greenhouse gases like nitrogen oxides, NOx, in addition to carbon dioxide, plus sulfur dioxides, SOx, and particulate matter, which pollute the air and harm human health. The maritime industry has begun exploring cleaner alternatives in response to tightening environmental regulations such as the International Maritime Organization IMO's 2020 sulfur cap, which limits the sulfur content in marine fuels. Marine diesel oil and marine gas oil are considered cleaner alternatives with lower sulfur content, leading to reduced emissions of SOx and particulate matter. However, these fuels are more expensive than HFO, and somewhat ironically, those sulfur emissions that they're trying to eliminate turned out to have a cooling effect on the atmosphere that was balancing out a bit of the effect of global warming. Getting rid of that effect means that it's even more urgent now to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Liquefied natural gas has emerged as another alternative, and many companies have invested in dual fuel ships that can run on LNG. This looked like a good stepping stone, as it offers significantly lower emissions of SOx, NOx, and particulate matter compared to traditional bunker fuels, and supposedly producing 40% less carbon dioxide than coal and 30% less than oil. However, the LNG ship engine type that is by far the most popular also happens to be extremely leaky, releasing methane directly into the atmosphere. Methane's obviously a very potent greenhouse gas, and so this makes LNG ships fall far short in reality of the 30 to 40% emissions reductions that they promised in theory. In fact, a lot of research has suggested that the use of LNG as a fuel for ships is more emissions intensive. And at the worst case, it's been estimated to be up to 82% more damaging to the climate than business as usual when the whole supply chain is considered. And even if it did offer an improvement over bunker fuel in terms of emissions, it is still a fossil fuel and it can't ever take us to zero emissions in the shipping industry. So this technology, if not actually a step backwards, is at the very best a dead end. So let's forget about that dead end and move on to the future of shipping and how we're going to remove emissions from this sector. The most important is the simplest. Ship less stuff. But I don't mean convincing people all around the world to just buy less gadgets and widgets off Amazon or Temu or wherever. Maybe we should do that for other reasons anyway, but it wouldn't really move the dial on shipping emissions. Shipping containers, including those with products from Amazon and fast fashion, make up only a small part of the approximately 20% of global shipping emissions that come from container vessels. So by all means, think twice before you decide if you need a new bike or pair of shoes or whatever, but going without is not going to be the main solution to shipping emissions. The biggest gains should actually come without any form of individual sacrifice. Remember when I split global shipping volumes into dry bulk, liquid bulk, and other? If you separate coal out of dry bulk and oil and natural gas out of liquid bulk, you end up with about 40% of shipping being used to simply schlep fossil fuels from one part of the planet to another. These will drastically reduce as we transition to renewable energy. Then there's an additional 10 to 15% of volume that is shipping iron ore and other ores from where they're mined to where they're processed. For example, here in Australia, we ship dirt and rocks to China, where that's processed to steel and lithium hydroxide and lithium carbonate to put in batteries. And then we ship those products back to Australia again, as well as to the rest of the world. We could be processing those ores in Australia instead, and as the energy transition progresses, we will find, I think, that it is much easier to do these energy-intensive processes on site where there is both abundant mineral resources and abundant clean energy resources, rather than trying to export our renewable energy via hydrogen or subsea cables. At least that's my hope that we do more of that. So that's the first easy win. Ship less stuff. The second relatively easy win is to just burn less fuel. This is a nice win-win arrangement. Burning less fuel costs less money, so it's a win for profits as well as the climate. And the potential gains here are probably bigger than you're imagining. Improved efficiency in shipping can be achieved by measures like slow steaming. Ships are similar to cars in that the slower they travel, the less fuel they burn. And you can save fully half of the fuel burn at the extreme end of this strategy. Then there are other ways to make ships more efficient. Improved hull designs minimize water resistance, and defouling technologies prevent the buildup of marine organisms, which can otherwise increase drag and fuel consumption. Modern anti-fouling coatings and regular hull cleaning can result in fuel savings of 5 to 10%. We are also seeing a back to the future moment where some ships are starting to become partially wind powered. That is a very exciting advancement, especially for a wind energy nerd like myself, and one that I hope I can do a whole video on in the near future. But efficiency can only get you so far. All of these technologies can reduce but not eliminate shipping fuels entirely, which brings us to the technology solutions that have the potential to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions from shipping. And there are no shortage of options. At least 5 different technologies are currently being progressed. First up, battery electric shipping. We have already had battery-powered ferries for a while now. I took several while I was living in Scandinavia in the 2010s. Those ferries did very short routes, but it might surprise you just how far battery-powered shipping can go these days. In 2023, China built its first electric-powered 700 TEU vessel for COSCO's shipping heavy industry. This was the largest installed battery capacity ever placed aboard a ship, and it contains 36 modular battery units, totaling around 58 megawatt hours powering this massive vessel. This approach allows for swapping batteries along the route, with the units being recharged at stations along the way. It weighs around 10,000 tons, and it's capable of navigating a 1,000 kilometre route, powered by 2 900 kilowatt main propulsion motors. But that's not even the longest, heaviest or fastest electric vessel. In May 25, Incat Tasmania launched the world's largest battery electric ship, a 130 metre, 14,000 tonne ferry named China Zarilla. It's fully electric, carries over 2,100 passengers and 225 cars, and it's powered by a 40 megawatt hour battery system. It will travel at up to 25 knots between Uruguay and Argentina, entirely on battery power. using 8 electric water jets and recharging at each end. And more electric ferries are coming. Across Europe and North America, many ferry operators are ordering electric or hybrid ferries with 5 to 10 megawatt hours of onboard storage. In San Francisco, for example, the city's ferry agency is building the first high-speed battery electric ferries in the US, set to run at 24 knots. They'll be delivered by 2027. Inland shipping is becoming increasingly electrified also. In the Netherlands, barges with swappable containerized batteries are already in operation, and Singapore has started rolling out charging hubs for electric harbourcraft. But what if you didn't want to stop at ferries or short-haul routes? One electric shipping startup, Fleet Zero, ran the numbers to see how far a fully loaded battery ship could go. And the results really surprised me. Their co-founder and CEO, Stephen Henderson, said in an interview on the ShiftKey podcast last year that in the early days of the company, they did a calculation to see how far a long ship could travel between charges if you filled all available space outside of cargo with Tesla Model S battery packs. And the answer was 5,400 nautical miles all the way from Shanghai to Long Beach without compromising cargo volume. While Fleet Zero didn't go on to buy thousands of EV batteries and shove them into a ship, they have developed a battery retrofit solution that allows ships to operate with zero emissions at port or in short sea operations. The journey from there to a fully electrified global shipping industry won't be quite as simple as their little back of the envelope calculation makes it sound though. One of the biggest challenges will be infrastructure. To support widespread electrification of shipping, ports worldwide need significant investment in charging infrastructure and transmission to get huge amounts of electricity to those ports. This kind of development is ongoing, but it will take a long time to fully materialize. As of now, electrification is most feasible for short sea shipping and ferries with fixed routes and regular access to charging points. For long-haul international shipping, where the energy requirements are much greater, the technology still has a way to go. My verdict for battery electric shipping is that it will get us further than you probably might have imagined, and it's great for short routes today, but still out of reach for long haul without new operational models. The vast majority of long haul shipping companies are looking at liquid fuels to get their fleets to net zero. So let's look at each of these now. We'll start with biofuels, which offer a potentially sustainable alternative to traditional fuels in the shipping industry, using renewable sources like agricultural waste or cooking oil to power ships. This approach significantly reduces greenhouse gas emissions and is compatible with existing ship engines and fuel systems, making it an attractive option for immediate implementation. And you can buy biofuels today, if someone is prepared to pay for it. COSCO Shipping has carried out large-scale bunkering of B24 biofuel blends in Asia, and Ada Cruises has successfully operated a vessel on 100% renewable biofuel. Canada Steamship Lines has also completed tests using 100% biodiesel across 8 vessels, and CMA CGM is running a global trial involving 32 ships on biofuel blends, aiming for carbon neutrality by 2050. While biodiesel prevents a viable drop-in solution, its high cost and competition from other industries like aviation remain significant challenges. In my recent video on sustainable aviation fuel, I mentioned how the biggest challenges there are scaling feedstocks sufficiently, as well as the cost premium over traditional jet fuel. Remember at the start of this video when I said that the heavy fuel oil was so cheap because it's from the literal bottom of the barrel? Well, aviation is used to paying for the top of the barrel. Yet, biofuels cost is still a big challenge even there. I personally really struggle to see how we will make enough sustainable biofuels to cover every sector that would like to use it. And I would have to assume that shipping will be the last in line based on willingness or ability to pay. So my verdict on biofuels, it's a good stopgap for immediate implementation today, but it's unlikely to scale up enough to power global shipping. The next stop is hydrogen, which in shipping usually means using fuel cells to generate electricity to power electric motors. It sounds great on paper. Quiet, zero emissions at the point of use, just water vapor and heat out the exhaust. That makes it attractive, especially in environmentally sensitive areas. But for ocean shipping, the challenges are enormous. Green hydrogen is wildly inefficient to produce, energy intensive to store, and extremely difficult to transport. Liquefying it so it can be stored more compactly requires chilling it to negative 253 degrees Celsius, and you lose a lot of energy just by doing that. Even then, the energy density is so low that you'd need to devote a huge chunk of a ship's volume just to the fuel. And it's expensive, currently 5 to 6 times more costly per unit of energy at least than alternatives. And yet, people keep trying. Take the H2 Barge 2, operating between Rotterdam and Duisburg. It's a 200 TEU inland cargo vessel converted to run on hydrogen fuel system. It's not crossing oceans, but it is showing that hydrogen can work, at least on short, predictable routes with access to fueling infrastructure. There are also projects like Flagships, an EU-funded initiative putting hydrogen fuel cell ships into service in Norway and France. Again, these are small-scale, niche applications, but they exist. So my verdict on hydrogen, technically possible, but totally impractical. The infrastructure, the cost, the inefficiency, it's so hard for me to see this working at scale for ocean-going vessels. So next we'll move on to methanol. Green methanol is chemically identical to traditional fossil methanol and similarly easy to handle. It can be produced from renewable sources such as biomass, which we already mentioned is expensive, or through the combination of carbon capture, also expensive, and green hydrogen, also expensive. So essentially you can choose between expensive or doubly expensive green methanol. The production cost is significantly affected by the cost of captured CO2 and green hydrogen, with a best case scenario putting it probably at least 4 to 6 times the cost of heavy fuel oil. For the casual observer of the decarbonisation efforts of the shipping industry, methanol seems like the early leader, with a lot of methanol-capable ship purchases having been announced in the past few years. Maersk, for instance, has ordered a total of 25 methanol-powered container vessels since 2021, with deliveries expected to begin next year. Despite this significant investment, Maersk does not plan to rely exclusively on methanol, which I assume is due to the high production costs. Other major players have also jumped in, with over 160 methanol-capable ships now on the global order book. My verdict on green methanol is that it would be the clear winner if green methanol costs came down. But they won't, because it relies on cheap, clean hydrogen and abundant direct air captured CO2, which don't exist and never will in all likelihood. Our final green shipping fuel is green ammonia. Zero carbon, high energy density, and extremely toxic. It's made by combining green hydrogen with nitrogen. Unlike hydrogen, ammonia doesn't need to be liquefied at extreme temperatures, and it's already transported by sea in large volumes for fertilizer. So the shipping industry argues they already know how to handle it. But handling it in bulk is one thing. Burning it at scale on ocean-going vessels is quite another. Ammonia is highly corrosive and dangerous to humans. Just a tiny leak can cause horrific respiratory and eye injuries. And yet, many of the biggest names in shipping are backing it. Ship engine builder MAN has begun full-scale testing of its 2-stroke ammonia engine, which has now run successfully across a full power range. And Wärtsilä will deliver its ammonia-capable Wärtsilä 25 engine from 2026. Fortescue, MOL, NYK, CMB Tech, and IDIS have all announced or launched ammonia-fueled vessels. Meanwhile, many other companies have ordered ammonia-ready ships, vessels designed with the structural space and layout to add ammonia capability later, but not equipped with engines that can actually run on it yet. As of mid-25, around 30 ammonia-ready ships have been delivered and another 166 are on order, compared to around 150 orders for ships with engines that can actually run on ammonia. So while ammonia has momentum on paper, most of the industry's perceived commitment is still speculative. These ammonia-ready ships won't help decarbonize anything until someone decides to retrofit them, and even then, the ones with ammonia-capable engines will likely run on conventional fuels until a steady, affordable supply of green ammonia is available at ports. For now, I wouldn't say that the shipping industry is all that committed to ammonia. It's still a case of options being left open. The one big exception to this is Australian iron ore company Fortescue. They have launched Fortescue's Green Pioneer, the world's first dual-fueled ammonia-powered ship, which has already completed successful ammonia-powered sea trials and is now heading out on a global demonstration voyage. I'll come back to that in a second. It's actually quite surprising to me how many of shipping's serious players are backing ammonia, because I really haven't seen much serious discussion about the seriously major risks that ammonia poses to human health and the ocean environment in the event of leaks. An ammonia shipping accident would be so much worse than an oil spill, for example. So they'll just make sure that there aren't any leaks then, right? Prevent any ammonia from coming into contact with any water? That is essentially the plan. And the major engine manufacturers, MAN and Wärtsilä, and early adopters like Fortescue, are taking the safety question seriously. Ammonia fuel systems are fully enclosed, typically with pipe-in-pipe designs and constant gas detection. If a leak does occur, it should be contained in a sealed secondary layer with alarms, ventilation, and isolation protocols kicking in automatically. That's all well and good, and obviously, me of all people, I'm all for good engineering being used to ensure safe systems, but I'm surprised there hasn't been more of an effort to bring the public along on this proposed change with major safety implications. Oil spills are not all that uncommon after all, and shipping is an industry that I don't think enjoys a particularly warm and fuzzy public sentiment and general trust that they'll do the right thing by their crews and the ocean's health. The only public statements about this topic that I've heard came from Andrew Forrest of Fortescue, who was recently interviewed by Bryony Worthington on the excellent Cleaning Up podcast. And to be honest, I did feel he was a little dismissive of the safety concerns that Bryony raised. Forrest just kind of said, yeah, it's dangerous, but so is petrol. We've got the safety taken care of and haven't had any accidents yet. Now, I can't fault Forrest for once again walking the talk on decarbonising really tricky sectors. I've made several other videos on the action that Fortescue is taking to decarbonise mining. But I can't say that my fears about ammonia safety are completely eliminated now, just because they've had a couple of ammonia-powered trips without any safety incidents yet. Ammonia isn't like petrol. We've probably all spilled a drop of petrol while filling up our cars, and no one's eyes or lungs or even skin was burned from that, so long as we take care not to engage in Zoolander-style petrol fights whilst also smoking. This kind of analogy does the opposite for me of reassuring me about ammonia. The fact is that ammonia plus water equals severe badness. And let's face it, there does tend to be a bit of water about on ships. Fuel systems can be sealed off, sure, but again, we're talking about ships here. As energy analyst Michael Barnard likes to point out in his extensive writing on green fuels for shipping, some of which I've used as sources in this video, if you can smell fuel on a ship, that means some of it has leaked. And if you've ever been on a ship, you'll know that you can almost always smell fuel. That will simply not do for an ammonia ship. The IMO has published interim safety guidelines to help pave the way for wider adoption. These include ventilation requirements, gas detection thresholds, containment system designs, and crew training protocols. But they're still just that, interim. Final rules are under development, and for now, every ammonia-capable ship still requires a case-by-case alternative design approval. No country has fully certified ammonia as a routine marine fuel yet. So this is still very much a prove it works and then we'll consider it kind of situation. So my verdict on ammonia for shipping, yeah, it probably is the most advanced option for long-haul zero-carbon shipping, but it can only become widespread if and only when, 1, we can make it safe enough, including bunkering at ports. 2, we can convince the public it's safe enough. And 3, we can secure a cheap and abundant supply of green ammonia, or just be willing to pay more for ammonia-powered shipping to prevent a climate catastrophe. Now, normally this is the part of the video where I tell you how I think it's all going to play out. But with green shipping, I genuinely don't know. The gap between what energy transition commentators are saying and what the shipping industry is actually doing is pretty huge. What we're seeing right now is a bit of everything. Every low emissions tech I've mentioned, batteries, biofuels, hydrogen, methanol, ammonia, each of them has real world trials underway. But here's the thing. It's extremely unlikely that we'll end up with all of these options coexisting at scale. Running global shipping on 5 different fuel types would mean duplicating bunkering infrastructure, refining capacity, transport logistics at every major port. That's not just expensive, it's physically hard to achieve given the space constraints at ports. So while the industry is hedging its bets today, we'll almost certainly see a winner or at most 2 emerge. But which? Each of these technologies has a shot if certain big hurdles can be cleared. Battery electric ships could win if we get a huge leap in energy density or rethink how long-haul shipping works entirely. Maybe with battery swapping at sea or charging at floating offshore wind farms. Biofuels are appealing because they're easy to slot into today's ships, but they won't scale unless prices drop and supply increases dramatically somehow. Hydrogen could work if infrastructure and storage challenges could be solved, but right now it's expensive and tricky to handle. Hard to see that changing. Methanol is ready to go, and Maersk is backing it in a big way, but it still needs cheap, clean hydrogen and direct air-captured CO2 to be truly green, and right now it's not. Ammonia has a lot of potential. It's energy dense, it doesn't contain carbon, and serious players are investing. But its toxicity and handling risks are no joke. If those safety issues can be solved and the public brought on board, I think it's got the best shot. And that's a big if. So I'm not ready to make a confident prediction, but I am watching ammonia closely. That might sound a little pessimistic. Such large technical and safety issues to overcome for every single one of those options. And almost certainly there'll be a large green premium for shipping fuels compared to some of the easier to abate sectors. But I think that fact does conceal a lot of more optimistic aspects about shipping becoming greener. First is that international shipping benefits from having a single global authority to make the kinds of changes that are required. They do have a net zero target, and they do have a track record of having already forced a move to a more expensive fuel for the good of health and the environment when they made ships pay more for low sulfur fuels to reduce local pollution. The other very optimistic aspect of shipping is that there are a lot of solutions that reduce emissions significantly without costing more, and those technologies are ready today and are already starting to reduce emissions intensity. One of the most comprehensive overviews of industry progress was just published by the Global Maritime Forum. Their Getting to Zero Coalition report surveyed 76 major companies and scored progress across 26 key actions for decarbonising shipping. They found there's strong momentum in setting targets and planning, but areas like infrastructure, fuel production, and zero emissions vessel deployment still lag behind. It's a clear sign. The transition is underway, but we've got a long way to go yet. Thanks to the Engineering with Rosie Patreon team, whose financial and emotional support I rely on to keep the channel going over 5 years now. Please join us. If you're a frequent watcher of the channel, you might have noticed that this and recent videos have had no sponsors. I so much prefer it this way. I'm sure you do too. The more patron support there is, the less sponsors I need to accept to get this channel to pay for itself. We need to roughly quadruple the size of the Patreon team to get there, so it'll take a while, but that's my long-term goal. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.